Well, hello, it's Patricia, and this is number three in my plant medicine journey kind of recollection. I'm going to just recount, obviously, what's happened since I did my mushroom journey. I had my first integration session this week with my guide, and I just kind of want to just go over what's come since the session, which, by the way, you can revisit if you haven't watched those, the setup and the actual session description of what happened that day. You can find those in the show notes below. So integration is a massively important part of doing any plant medicine journey. It's not like recreational use of any plant drug. It's taking something with deep intent and humility to what it might actually show you. It's about, I guess, changing your perception of yourself, your attitude to yourself and the world you live in, and maybe clear some blockages. That's certainly why I went into it, was to help clear some of the ancestral, I believe, anxiety that I'm carrying. That became very clear as I documented in the description of the session itself, where I was shown very clearly that my anxiety is my mother's. It's comes from that line. It may also be partly my father's as well, but it's very clearly something my mother experienced. And in fact, my next integration session is going to be using a technique called matrix reimprinting, where I'm going to revisit the younger me, even the me as a fetus in utero, and help to integrate that experience, which I believe was a very, very difficult one. I was born in 1964. You can work out the age from that. 1963, when I was in utero, was one of the hardest winters ever experienced in the UK. In fact, you can still find online movies made about that year. The winter was so extreme that it didn't rise above freezing for about 3 months, which in the UK is unheard of. Okay, if you live in Canada or somewhere like that, that's not unusual at all. But in the UK, that's extremely rare. And snow was so heavy that in some places in the UK, it rose to the level of the second story of a building. And people were stuck literally in their homes. They couldn't get out. They couldn't feed their animals if they were on farms and so on. And everything ground to a halt. Distribution of fuel, people ran out of heating, food, and so on. It was absolutely desperate, because as a country we're not set up to deal with snow much. We don't get that much. We get a light smattering. Some further north, obviously, and in Scotland they get a lot more. But in general, we don't have like snow plows that routinely go along and clear as they do in Scandinavia, because I've been in Scandinavia during snowfall and it's all very, very efficient, and everything carries on as normal. That doesn't happen in the UK. Everything grinds to a halt. And so I imagine that's what was going on when my mum was carrying me. And my brother sparked this idea in me, because he told me of a memory he had of that winter. And I guess my mum was pregnant at the time, and going across the road and actually slipping on the ice that had formed on top of the snow in the middle of the road, and both of them going over. And then my mum apparently kind of picked herself up and my brother, and dusted them down and carried on. But I can imagine the whole scenario was quite frightening, because she was about to have a baby, and how was it going to work? And my dad, I know, was a very hard worker. He would have been at work all day. She was basically dealing with it all. So in the matrix reimprinting session, I will cover that in detail after we've done it. But the idea is that you revisit, you use your imagination to go back to a scenario which you can't possibly remember. You might remember it, depends on the age you were at the time, but you kind of go back to the sense impression of that time, and as the adult you are, and you use a form of tapping, which is emotional freedom technique, or EFT, but you imagine doing it on the younger version of you. Okay, and that may sound really weird, and I'm sure if you've never come across some of this stuff before, that may sound very strange, but I've done it once with a very skilled practitioner called Sharon King, and I did it on a memory I had of the last time I saw my dad. And it really shifted things for me because it changed the way my younger self, which is a kind of echo within you, felt about that situation, because I had a great deal of guilt from that scenario. And I managed to change the ending, as it were, and create a proper ending to that meeting. And so I'm not sure what's going to happen with the matrix reimprinting session, because I'm not in control of that. For once, I'm not the therapist, I'm the client. But my aim is to go back and help relieve the stress and tension that little developing baby was experiencing during that winter. At least that's the intention. Okay, so that's something we did discuss that we might do. The other thing that came up was the dosaging, and I thought maybe you might be interested to know how dosaging actually varies between using it in ceremony and using it clinically, because a lot of the information that's out there is, particularly in the UK and the US, is very geared towards clinical trials, clinical usage within very controlled settings. And my guide told me that, in fact, in clinical trials, it's a sort of 1% psilocybin solution, if you like, that you use, whereas in ceremony, you're much more likely to use fresh grown magic mushroom, usually ground, drunk as a tea, or eaten. Some people just eat them. They're very mushroomy. So the dosaging I had actually was around about 40 milligrams after I had my top up, equivalent to the clinical dose. It wasn't, in fact, it was about 4, but it's that differential between the clinical solution and a whole food source. And so she mentioned that a heroic dose, they call it a heroic dose, it's such a strange terminology, but I've come across this over and over again, is when you take a maximal dose for kind of reasons of you really want to get somewhere very important. It's a bit of a macho thing, I've discovered. But people talk about the heroic dose, and the heroic dose for psilocybin mushrooms is about 50 milligrams. So I wasn't terribly much below that. And yet, my experience was really gentle. Now, I'm not saying yours would be, but I was so held, and even upping the dose, I didn't experience any massive cathartic experiences or frightening experiences, which I know one can on certain other psychedelics like LSD, ayahuasca, and so on. So it was very humbling, actually, to kind of be part of something like that, and to witness myself having to let go, because that's what the experience really is, letting go of all your preconceptions and fears, and allowing yourself to be carried, to be released into a state of unknowing and uncertainty. And that's certainly what happened. And I was given some very specific instructions about who I am, what I need to do, which very much matched with my gene key profile of stepping up, getting my message out there, and so on, which is already having effects in the real world about how I present myself, which is very much heart-based. I'm here, this is who I am, I'm not behind a mask, I'm not influencing, I'm not selling anything, I'm here just being myself and giving of my experience as a human being who's gone through some suffering and to get to where I am now. And there is a grace in that, to have come through suffering and to have survived. So it is an experience of letting go your resistance to experiencing things that are out of your control. And so I would say, if that frightens you, that is the very thing that you need to do. And it was the thing that scared me. We often in life, this came up in my integration session, we want to avoid the lower emotions: fear, anger, shame, guilt, the things which we consider to be bad, emotions that don't make us feel good, that often create problems for us. And yet, in order to fully emerge as a as a fully realized human being, we need to feel all our emotions. And that's partly what I do with people when I work with them, is give them the safe space, the holding, to be able to experience those. And that's what was given to me during the session and in the subsequent integration session as well. I was very held as ever by my guide. So we need compassion for ourselves in this integration. This is a very important time. We're looking at allowing ourselves to fully feel and let the process continue. It's true to say that true gold can arrive from the willingness to explore, right? It isn't the avoidance of suffering that creates healing. It's the willingness to feel, to be present in, and to transmute your suffering into something else. And it's very much an ongoing quest of mine, both personally and professionally, to learn more about this deep exploration. I was actually sent something yesterday evening by my guide, and I might include that in the show notes. Actually, it was a very interesting podcast with Chris. I can't remember his surname. He's a former academic who took many LSD trips to explore his own psyche. But what he came up with was the evolution of mankind, where, he had some real insights about this critical mass that we need to reach for humankind in order to evolve further, because at the moment we're headed for extinction. I'm sorry to sound gloomy, but the way we're using resources right now, and how disconnected we are from the world we live in, how deeply spiritually disconnected we are from our role in nature and who we are embedded in nature, has to change. It has to shift. And he went through this amazing I think he did 73 journeys over 20 years, and he was discussing that. He wrote a book about it, which really, I'm going to listen to it again. It was so good. It was really extraordinary. Now, not everybody would want to do that. That really is a hero's journey. And I think he was lucky in that he had the support of his wife, who was a psychotherapist, and was able to hold him through those experiences. For many people, that would be the dissolution of your entire being, and you would end up psychotic, which is what does happen, and it's something to really be aware of. We have to be very cognizant of the fact that doing any kind of work where you dissolve the ego structure, which maps pretty well to the default mode nucleus. It's a network. Sorry, it's the DMN in your brain. Is a dangerous thing to do. You need to be fully aware of what you're doing. You need to titrate and control that to some extent, and you need to have someone with you while that happens. For me, it was a total connection to nature, but for many people, it can be frightening and very, very hard to go through. Why would anyone do this in that case? Well, I think it's curiosity. It's the wisdom that you could achieve through finding a different perspective on life, and that we are indeed part of nature. We are intimately connected above and below, and we need to understand and undertake our responsibility for that in a much more mindful way if we're to survive. So I'm on an ongoing quest. That's why I'm here. That's what I'm doing on my YouTube channel. And I'm helping other people to understand that this is possible for everyone, to move from stuckness into freshness. Okay, so to keep myself fresh, my Gene Key profile, which anyone can do, you can just go to genekeys.com, says that in order to keep alive and fresh, I have to always be looking at new things and surrounding myself with new things. That things, once they're done for me, are done. I need to move them out of my field of energy, which I agree with. I'm always looking at new stuff. At the moment, I'm looking at quantum biology, which is a really exciting new field, which I'm going to be recording something on very shortly. So in my public work, in my work with people, I'm helping them to explore similar themes and to move on in their lives from something that's kept them stuck all these years. Usually it's memories, emotional memories that haven't been processed. And they've been, as my guide beautifully put, marinating in misery. Okay, you marinate in the toxic chemistry, neurochemistry of despair and anger and fear. And what it does is it just keeps perpetuating itself, because once you're in that marinade, it's very hard to get yourself out without help. And so this indeed is why people get stuck in long-term chronic conditions, which I'm not going to talk about here because that's not the role of this particular podcast, but you'll find a lot more on my channel about that. People get stuck in a belief system that was wired during their childhoods. And sometimes psychedelics can help explode that attachment to this story of yourself and show you who you really are. That's what therapy does. It isn't here to fix the problem. It's here to explode the programming of yourself, the personality, the adapted self, to become truer and more authentic in your life. Because believe it or not, that's the thing that the number one thing that people who are dying, the wishes of the dying, is that I'd lived a more authentic life. So this journey is an initiation into a willingness to explore. It's not just for the self, it's for the collective. And I think the more people that understand that, like Chris, the guy I was talking about, he sees that there's a critical mass of people that need to do this inner work in order for us to evolve. He believes it will be translated into our DNA, which is something that's being echoed by a lot of people. That DNA is a vibratory molecule. It's not just this, fixed double helix. It vibrates, it has a resonance, and there is something that seems to be unfolding in the nature of being human that is coming into the next level of consciousness. So a portal is opening, maybe, in our awareness as more and more of us question, is this the life that we're living currently? Is it okay? Does it satisfy? Does it meet our needs as individuals and as a society? And the answer is mostly no. So it's about letting go of the need for a certainty and a willingness to open to uncertainty. And in many cases, that's achieved by letting go. And I think what psychedelics do is they speed that process up. And if, like me, you have a belief, an inherent learned belief that you're not safe in this life, and that's what I've been carrying, that's what gives me anxiety. And it doesn't matter what the triggers are. Usually they're things that go wrong or break or things that I can't fix or sort. It floods me with feelings of anxiety. And what I'm feeling now is there's a slight gap opening up between the trigger and the response. And so there's a breadth, there's something opening up where instead of going into that automatically, I'm actually going, okay, I see that happening. I'm much more aware of it. I'm able to maybe redirect myself into something, a different response. So using these techniques and tools to open up the dialogue in your internal construction of yourself enables you to make new decisions that are not based on your childhood programs, and also enables you to kind of soothe yourself. That's what I'll be doing in the Matrix reimprinting, and it's what I do with clients. Just to sort of self-care, to self-love, and say, hey, that part of you that's anxious and afraid is held in that moment, is soothed, is loved. And we can actually do that for ourselves. It's called reparenting, and many of the tools I use that. We can actually use music even to soothe ourselves, and often we do. And during the journey, that's a big part of it, is listening to soundtrack that you've created. and putting energy into that. What is it that moves you? That we know that music moves people emotionally, and so that's definitely part of the journey, but it's also part of the integration. And it was suggested to me to re-evoke that through listening to some of the music I listen to on the day. So I'm definitely going to do that. So the medicine carries on working after the journey itself. It's not like a drug, in the sense of taking a pharmaceutical medicine, which tends to work very specifically on one pathway. This is an organic, holistic, associative adjustment. It moves throughout your experience of yourself rather than just one thing and linear. It's not linear, okay? It's also not a magic bullet that will fix a problem. And if you're going into it like that, you're very unlikely to solve your issue, because the way you're thinking is part of the issue. It's the quality of your consciousness that counts, and mastery of that is the goal, really, finding a way forward where you can take charge of your thinking, of finding a new way of interpreting what matters to you and how you evoke that in your daily life. It's about being about getting closer and closer towards authenticity, being your true self, making manifest that which has been hidden, adding light into the situation. I wrote a book a few years ago, I think 3 or 4 years ago, about light and life. It was called Life Illuminated, because I really see that light is not only a real kind of manifest thing, in that we need it, we need daylight in our lives, but it's also a metaphor for adding energy into something, for creating something out of darkness, for illuminating. And in fact, it's in the Bible. God used light to create life. And so here we are, evoking that in a new way. It's also a suggestion that I relook at the gene keys, because I've had my profile done. That's free. That's something everybody can do, to find your hologenetic profile. I have talked about that in another video. But to revisit that and maybe look at the 7 sacred seals, which is a pathway through the gene keys, which is a way of kind of reinterpreting for yourself your interaction between who you are and the field that surrounds you, the field in which we're embedded, the field of information. I'm going to be recording a video on that this week as well. So, folks, I am at my first integration at the moment. It's still ongoing. Dreams are still really, really vivid. Last night's was strange. Actually, it was a dimming of the light. It was I kind of saw an image of the earth as it could become if we don't wake up. A dark place of no life. And it was so sad, and I don't think it's going to happen. I think we're going to awaken before that. But it was a vision of what could happen if we don't. And so that's where I am at the moment. I'm kind of integrating all these ideas as ever, jumping around. You've got this uncensored. I made a few notes, but as usual, I haven't scripted this. This is just off the cuff. If any of what I'm saying is of interest to you, do get in touch. Please, I can't give information on how to do this for yourself. You need to find your own sources and people. But in any other way that I can help, I'm happy to. This is new territory for me and very interesting indeed. So take care of yourselves out there. Be kind. Above all things, be kind. Take care. Bye for now.